Today in this video, we're going to be kind of taking a look at Algeth'ar Academy for the upcoming expansion Midnight. It is coming back in the Season 1 pool. This is the dungeon that I'm probably the most excited about returning. Algeth'ar Academy was one of my favorite back in Dragonflight. There's a couple of updated mechanics, and they've made some additions or some changes to the trash at the end of the dungeon, but we're going to just break everything kind of down here. Anyways, let's get into it. So starting the dungeon, just as you probably remember, you're going to be heading down into kind of the start of the academy where there's the different, I don't know, like different teachers or whatever, the different dragon flights that you can pledge your allegiance to, and they bestow different buffs. So I went directly for the black dragon flight, but there's mastery, crit, verse, and haste, as well as like, I think there's just like a healing increase. But anyways, we're going to head to the Botanica first, pulling all of the lashers and skitterflies together. Now, I had a slower start to this dungeon, so the patrol was in kind of a weird spot. Getting this pull set up, definitely a little tedious for something like a brewmaster that doesn't have a great way to pull things from range while doing AoE. So aggro was a little all over the place, but once we got everything kind of set up and going, the pull felt pretty good. Unfortunately, the shaman dropped Earth Grab Totem, which definitely did not help threat, because mobs were then kind of stuck out and were delayed at coming in, but it's alright. So the skitterflies really just jump around. They have a stacking in rage that if you have a soothe, that's great. I wasn't running the improved paralysis here, so I wasn't actually able to soothe any of these, but it wasn't a big deal. You just have to kind of fight through the pain, I guess. And then the agitated lashers don't really do much. They just kind of melee the tank. And then finally you have these vile lashers who spawn these giant green circles on the ground that ideally you just don't stand in. Or it will, I believe it's a disorient, which if a tank gets disoriented, the mobs will stop attacking the tank and they will attack whoever has the highest level of threat, which can be problematic. Anyways, we had the kind of final pack here, and once this vile lasher goes down, we're going to be heading into the first boss that we're going to be taking on, which is the third boss in the journal, which is the Overgrown Ancient. What's nice about this dungeon is you can kind of go to whichever boss you'd like to first. You can do the Overgrown Ancient, you can do Crawth, you can do Vexamus first. It depends on your group, your comp, where you want to allocate lust, cooldowns, etc. One other thing you'll notice is that I was doing a lot of damage in those last couple pulls. Unfortunately, the damage meter in-game is a little bugged right now. It's counting the damage that I'm taking from stagger as my damage. And so that will obviously cause the Brewmaster to look really, really good compared to other classes or DPSs or other tanks. So just keep that in mind. Damage being inflicted to self counts as damage. So yeah, be a little careful of that. This fight is exactly the same. The big improvements come to the swirls. So that's probably the nicest thing about this fight. So basically, boss spawns a bunch of little ads that are dormant, spawns an ancient branch, which is going to cast Healing Touch on the boss trying to heal it. And then when you kill it, it spawns this green circle, which will heal all ads and remove everyone's debuff that they get from when the ad spawns. It's like Splinter Bark or something like that. And then that's the fight. Then he's going to spawn the second set of ads, and any remaining ads will then be unleashed on your group. So tanks are going to have to make sure they're getting threat here. Each successful auto attack applies a poison debuff that stacks. So having at least one poison dispel is kind of important in here. I'm hoping they tune it appropriately where it's really not that big of a deal. But between that, the tank buster, and the melee attacks, this can be a pretty scary tank fight in like higher content. Anyways, that's pretty much the fight though. Like it's just a rinse and repeat at that point once you get the non-dormant ad wave down. And then it's just focusing, killing branch, kick, healing touch, and yeah, we're chilling. Once the Overgrown Ancient goes down, we are then heading over to this Guardian Sentry, which is one of the mini bosses, pretty much protecting the Crawth platform. You have to defeat this mob to be able to kind of go to the other access points in the dungeon. So this guy, again, same deal here. You can stand in this Expel Intruders. It does knock you back. It does do a bit of damage. Tanks are generally fine. Tankier DPS can sometimes do it as well. If not, you can also use the pillars to do line of sight. And then, of course, he's still spawning his tornadoes, which will circle around and I believe stun you if you get hit. So do your best not to get hit here. I do want to show you guys the line of sight thing just in case for those who didn't play in Dragonflight. But as you can see, I'm still in the circle, but I am LOS and it prevents you from taking damage or getting knocked back. So do keep that in mind. The general play, at least back in the day, was like tanking him near one of the pillars. And then as a new, or as like the tornado spawn, you would then transition to a different pillar that is clear, so then your group can easily just LOS while maintaining uptime. Now, of course, this doesn't matter too much for range, but it is very, very nice for melee. We're going to finish it off here, and now we are able to access Crawth's platform. This is the technical second boss of the dungeon in both the dungeon journal and the way that we're pulling it. And we're going to gather up this first set of territorial eagles. These mobs are kind of like fodder. They don't really do a whole lot. But unfortunately, you have to kill this wave of adds before the next one spawns. Probably my biggest grievance with this dungeon is this kind of stuff, like RP. Having to kill one pack to get the next pack in. I don't like it in dungeons because there's no counterplay. Like, there's no way to improve the time. Back in the day, there was like, you were able to like jump off the edge and tag them from a distance. But I believe Blizzard has fixed that. I didn't try it in this run because I'm just assuming it doesn't work like it did back in the day. But the next two pulls have these things called Alpha Eagles on top of the Territorial Eagles. And the Alpha Eagles do a frontal and they do an enrage that makes all the mobs kind of do more damage. So just, you want to be aware of that. Again, not the end of the world. You don't need a soothe for it. But if you have one, not a terrible idea to deploy. Last but not least, now the third wave is coming in. And this is only a +10 and not a 12 like I've showcased in my other dungeons. So we are having to deal with that Xal'atath affix. It also means that mobs don't have as much health. We are scaled to a slightly lower item level, but there's the Xal'atath's bargain affix that gives all the mobs 10% health and damage doesn't exist either. So this shouldn't look as spiky as some of my other footage did. And then once the eagles go down, you have to throw the 3 balls into the kind of the fire side to get the boss spawned. Once again, a little bit of RP that I'm not a fan of. Good time to get a drink for healers. It's maybe re-app on a food buff. But yeah, Crawth is pretty much the same fight. They have changed it a little bit. So I'll talk about that when we get there. But there's the tank buster. And the start of the fight's really boring. It's basically a tank buster, a frontal, and the deafening screech that stacks. Does it actually stack anymore? I don't think it does, actually. Now that I thought it did. Holy. Okay, we're learning. So the deafening screech, I guess, no longer stacks each time, which is, I think, makes the fight better, right? Because the problem with this fight back in the day was that it was just a hard DPS check. Like, eventually you would get one shot. So it looks like it's now just a damage over time effect. And then what happens is the boss will then just start casting this Ruinous Winds cast, which is essentially your timer to throw these orbs into the correct goal that you want to, whether it's Searing Blaze or the winds. If you do Searing Blaze, it stuns the boss, he'll take a damage increase, and then fire swirls will start spawning on the ground that you're going to have to start dodging. Now, previously, the boss worked as the Deafening Screech would ramp up in damage being dealt every single time, and you would be able to reset your stacks by dunking the orb. So the way you would do it is try to allocate defensives and healer CDs to live as long as you possibly can, and then you would kind of put it into the goal. Now it's based on health thresholds, but the Deafening Screech no longer stacks. So the fight does get a little bit progressively harder later in the fight, but I guess it's less one-shot potential, which is nice. And then when you do the winds, you don't get the stun or the damage amp, but you do get a nice haste buff, and if you pick up these orbs around the edge of the room, you temporarily gain a resistance to the pushback, and you get a pretty sizable haste buff. Now, as a Brewmaster, this doesn't matter. Haste doesn't really affect us as much compared to, obviously, a class like, I don't know, like an in-hand shaman, for example. And then that's it. This is the rest of the fight. It's pretty chaotic. You got tornadoes going around. You got winds pushing you. You have fire swirls you need to dodge. You still have to dodge the frontal. There's a tank buster. There's deafening screech. So this fight gets very hectic at the end, and I love this. I love the progression of this boss over its duration, its entirety. But yeah, then Crawth goes down. So once Crawth dies, you're heading over to the final area, which I guess is the first area, if you decided to go to Vexamus first, which is totally fine. I've done both routes before. It just, people like to use Lust and stuff on the first pull with all the lashers for big dam. But we're going to grab a couple of these different foragers and the big Ravager. Now, there's a couple of other mobs in here, but the Ravager is kind of the important one that got changed. So back in the day, it used to leap at a random player. Generally, it was a ranged player who was the furthest away. They now made it so, well, you would line a sight and then it wouldn't jump. It would just reset, like it wouldn't move, and then it would just turn at the tank and cast its frontal. They have fixed it. It will teleport to the player instead of like leaping at them. I don't know what they did, obviously on the back end, but unfortunately it no longer can be LOS'd. So unfortunately, everyone needs to pretty much stand near melee now, which again isn't the end of the world, but it means that that player will be taking damage and you need to make sure you're not in the circle. There's a couple of casters in that pull as well. It's just you kick their surge cast, and it's pretty chill. The only other mob that I want to talk about is a little bit further forward. So it's this pack here that's on the bridge. There are some mobs called they're battle axes, and they do a nasty tank buster and bleed application. So you want to be careful. I think it's dodgeable because I noticed on my Brewmaster I don't get it as much, but when it does hit, you definitely feel it. So you want to be careful when you have a couple battle axes in the pull, but at the end of the day, it's not the end of the world. Last but not least, we're finding ourselves at the Vexamus's boss room. Couple of packs to clear here. You're going to see those mana fiends again. You're going to see the battle axes like I've talked about before. And this time you're going to see these lecture notebooks or textbooks, unruly textbooks, I should say. And they do a pretty important cast to interrupt called the monotonous lecture. This will, as the cast goes up, if it gets off, it turns into a channel, which I think lasts like 6 seconds, and it stuns the player being targeted. I'm not sure if it shows that it's like targeting me, but it ends up targeting someone else. I can't remember if the tank can get targeted by this, but basically that's the thing you want to try to interrupt when possible. You can also save CC for it to stop the channel once that starts, but if you stun it or CC it before it starts its channel, it'll just try to recast it immediately. But once the channel starts, it goes on cooldown. So we did 2 packs on either side, and then we're just pulling this last pack, and this will spawn the boss. Now, once again, a little bit of RP. What groups used to do, at least what I used to do back in Dragonflight, is while you were waiting for this roleplay, you would pull a couple more trash pulls, sometimes even onto the boss if you were feeling super comfortable. That's not going to be the case in this run. We're just going to wait for the boss to spawn and be good with it. The roleplay is nothing crazy, but it's definitely a little bit of a time loss here. You'll see us just kind of standing around waiting for Vexamus to spawn. And again, this fight, pretty much identical. The only nice thing, well, the bosses I'm fine with for the most part, but they have updated the circle animations on the ground, so it's a lot easier to see. I think having like the nice vibrant purple or lavender pink, whatever you want to call this, I think actually has a really nice contrast to the stone that we're fighting on, like just the stone textured ground, or Nate stone, I guess. I don't know. So yeah, I think that this fight visually it looks a lot better. It's a little bit clearer, and that is most important or noticeable during his like little intermission. So when Vexamus hits his full energy, he does like a pushback, this arcane fissure. It pushes all the players back, and then you spawn 3 sets of swirls. These used to be really hard to see, and I've seen a lot of players get clipped by it and they just die. No fault of their own, it's just bad animation. This time around, it's that nice, crisp, clean. It was like what they did in like 11.1 when they introduced like the Undermine, this whole change to like the way that ground textures work or look. So yeah, that's Vexamus. Pretty much rinse and repeat. You just soak the orbs around the room and aim the frontal away. As a tank, I try to soak a little bit more when I can. You know, I try to go to like 2 or 3. With the removal of diffuse magic, well, it's not gone, but it's tied to Fortifying Brew now, and I'm not playing the talent. I don't really want to run it, but it could be nice to have, like, being a dwarf again. This might be a dwarf season if you're really trying to optimize. And but again, my racial take is play what you like. Anyways, boss goes down, and we are heading to this final like little trash bridge pull before we head up to the academy, fighting Echo of Doragosa. So we're gonna double this up. A couple of battle axes. Actually, I think 3 of them here. It also, I just realized this right now. I was thinking like, man, it feels like there's a mob missing from this pack. There used to be like scepters or something that did casts, and it looks like they removed them. So it's just fiends and just battle axes. I think this is a great change. Fiends also don't spam cast. They just every once in a while will cast surge. So this is ideal to me. I really like when packs feel like this, right? There's a couple of casts. They don't spam them. It's easy to group them up. And yeah, big damn. One issue that I've been having with some of these other dungeons is when you have a lot of casters. I think I saw a comment actually this morning before I started recording this on one of my last videos. Someone was saying like, I don't see the problem with like all these casters. I don't have a problem with casters. I have a problem with grouping up casters. Like, you know, Like having to get multiple kicks to get the mobs to walk into a centralized place so damage is most effective. That's the issue I have with casters. Not necessarily the fact that you have to interrupt them, not the fact that they exist. It's just moving casters is really annoying if you're not a prop paladin or a DK. Anyways, this area is what got changed. So these Echo Knights, instead of doing like an AoE circle around them, like a little whirlwind that you can technically just outrange by backing up a little bit, they now spawn these whirling echoes around random players. You'll see it happen again here shortly, and this is the new mechanic for these Echo Knights, which makes it pretty difficult to pull a lot of them because it takes up a lot of space and it does a insane amount of damage. Of course, the animation's a lot more clear now, but it's now targeting like technically range players, where it used to just be in melee and then you were able to counter it with stuns or knockbacks or CC. And so a strategy back in the day was to pull a lot of trash onto boss, at least in competitive play. I don't think that'll be the case anymore. You're probably going to take this area really, really, really slow. But as you probably could tell from the rest of the run, is we pulled pretty much everything up to this point. And so even at like with that pull cadence, we're still having to pull a couple of mobs up here. These spectral invokers are pretty annoying. Sometimes casters are coded in such a way where if the tank is line of sight, they won't cast. And sometimes if anyone's in line of sight, they'll try to cast on that player. These are those types of mobs where they'll continue casting if not everyone's LOS'd. So it's really important that if you are doing something like this where you're trying to get into the room, that everyone moves in line of sight's the caster, so they all come in at the same time. So yeah, this end of the dungeon is something that I'm not super thrilled with. Again, I think the visual update is really good. I think this was a very rewarding part of the dungeon because you were able to pull fairly large. There was a little bit of like skill curve with like CC management and making sure Echo Knights and casters were locked down, but now it feels like you're just going to take this in 2 small pulls. So the rest of the dungeon is really fun because you're doing like 5, 6, 7, 12, 20 target pulls all throughout. And then you get here and it's like, well, we're going to pull a couple mobs at a time. Now, again, this is a pug. It's beta. We're not coordinated, obviously. So I'm sure there's a world where you could probably get pretty aggressive with your pulls up here. But in a pug group, it feels like you're a little restricted in your pull size at the end of the dungeon. But for the most part, like that's the only blunder I think Algeth'ar Academy is making. The rest of it feels really good. Last but not least, we have Echo of Doragosa. Fight works exactly the same. She's going to start off by spawning these pools on the ground that are going to send out these orbs. Every time you get hit by one of her mechanics, you gain a debuff that gives you a ramp, like stacking damage. When you hit 3 stacks, it will then drop the stacks and create a pool like you're seeing. So the more you get hits, the more damage you deal. But if you get hit too much, you kind of get punished by more orbs spawning. And the orbs, of course, do damage when you do get hit. So you don't want to get hit, but there is a tactical play where it's like, well, I'm going to soak one of the orbs on purpose or 2 of the orbs on purpose so I can do more damage. I think this is a really interesting fight, though I do think it's relatively boring. It's like dodge swirls, dodge frontal, run away from the suck-in. But I think that kind of underlying like mechanic of the damage increase is really, really interesting, at least to me. So here comes the power vacuum. It sucked us in. We run out. That's where I think people really get hit, though, is when the orbs are coming in at the same time that you get sucked in because you're not in control of your character. Now, there's ways to counter the suck-in with, like, I believe, like, I don't know if DA works, but you could, like, blink back out. You can transcend back out, heroic leap really quickly. But, yeah, this is pretty much the entire fight. There's no, like, phase or anything. The more you get hit, though, the more cluttered the room's going to be, which, again, can be quite problematic, but I don't think I've ever run into the point where this was actually one of the worst rooms I've seen. Like we already have like 9 pools down on the ground, so I just decided to pull the boss to the far end of the room. I was like, okay, we just got to reposition, and then the shaman soaked another one right under the boss. So this is a fight where you kind of want to pay attention to your stacks, because these energy bombs that go out target, I want to say, I always thought it targeted 2 players, but if you have 2 stacks and you get targeted by the energy bomb, you're forced to take the damage, so you're gonna drop a pool if you're at 2 stacks. So yeah, that's the fight though. Like nothing too crazy. You're actually gonna see that happen right here. I got targeted by energy bomb. I have 2 stacks, so I'm gonna roll out, drop my thing far away, and then I'm gonna come back to the boss. And that's just a way to keep the room clear. Do you have to do it? Not really. There's a ton of room, but eventually the pools do start disappearing. I believe it's 2 minutes roughly. I don't remember the exact. I want to say it's every like. Pools on the ground will only last for 2 minutes. And so you can see I look back at the start of the room, it was starting to clear up a little bit. So yeah, that was Algeth'ar Academy. I think it's almost identical to how it was outside of a few changes. There's a couple of issues I have with the dungeon's design, mostly the trash at the back half of the dungeon I'm not like super thrilled about, but I think Crawth got some good updates. The rest of the bosses are all fine. It really comes down to tuning. And then of course, like I said, the Echo Knights and the casters at the end feels like you can't really pull as big, which isn't an issue. It's just not as fun. We like to pull big and see big numbers. I think that's a universal rule of WoW. The last thing I want to mention about Brewmaster specifically is you can see here in my damage being shown, stagger, like I said, is counting as damage. So it was like about 20 or 25% of my damage that I dealt over the course of the key was my stagger. So I think I ended up doing like closer to like 24k overall. So you can use that as a reference if you do testing or if you're playing other tanks. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the breakdown. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.